Border making is not always a straightforward business, and to some extent this is, and also is not, the case in East Africa between Somalia and Kenya. Over the past couple of years, the two states have had a rocky relationship, with Somalia cutting off diplomatic ties between the two in December of 2020, accusing Kenya of violating its sovereignty, while citing concerns over alleged Kenyan interference in the state's internal affairs ahead of its election. In late 2019, Somalia accused Kenya of destroying mobile network towers on its territory as part of its counter-insurgency effort, and in January of 2020, it also accused Kenya of arming guerrilla forces and sending them over the border into its Jubaland province, where clashes took place around a border village. In March last year, Kenya accused Somalia of an unwarranted attack on a town on its side of the border during heavy fighting between the Somali government and regional forces, something the state has since denied. Despite frosty relations in recent times over many issues, at the heart of this East African split has been the two states' disagreement over where their maritime boundary lies. Kenya and Somalia, two former British and Italian colonies, had their land border drawn by their two colonial rulers, and as is the case with many states that had their borders arbitrarily drawn, this has caused conflict. Before the arrival of the European colonial powers, the border between what is now Kenya and what is now Somalia was relatively undefined and often shifted. This border, created as part of a 1924 decision between the British and Italians, has been a source of tension and intersects an ethnically Somali area, giving rise to a whole host of issues in itself. It is from this arbitrarily drawn land border that Kenya and Somalia's sea border dispute stems. For many years, the maritime border between the two states was left relatively undefined. Somalia's rampant instability and tumultuous civil conflict meant that the maritime border between the two states was not a major focus. However, with the development of concepts such as the blue economy, the lessening of the scope of the state's conflict, and the prospect of large oil reserves in the vicinity of the maritime area where the state's land border with Kenya meets the sea, this would quickly change. Oil and gas exploration off the coast of Somalia has been scant due to the state's violent recent history, with some non-commercial, mainly onshore discoveries made before the beginning of political turbulence in the late 1960s. However, the seafloor off the Somali coast is thought to be similar to that of other East African states such as Tanzania and Mozambique, where large oil and gas finds have already occurred, and many Somalis are hoping to see promising exploratory finds in the same manner as states like Guyana have just experienced. Nonetheless, Somalia is considered by many in the oil and gas industry as promising frontier territory, and this evidently plays a role in the geopolitics of the dispute. Both states' views on where their maritime border lies obviously differ. Kenya claims their border is perpendicular, bisecting the two countries' undecided maritime zones in an easterly direction along a latitudinal line, while Somalia claims that their border runs along an equidistant line in a southeasterly direction from the terminus of their land border. The result of these two differing claims is a triangular disputed area, in which there is thought to be a large amount of oil and rich fishing grounds. This disputed triangle is roughly 100,000 square kilometers or 40,000 square miles in size. Kenya bases its claim on numerous factors, with the main two being a 1979 proclamation and also on two bilateral agreements it signed with Tanzania in 1976 and 2009. Firstly, Kenya claims that in 1979, the President of Kenya made a unilateral proclamation that lay claim to a parallel boundary for both its territorial sea and exclusive economic zone, something that it alleges Somalia tacitly accepted by its non-opposition to the proclamation. Secondly, in regards to the Tanzanian agreements, the agreement in 1976 delineated the two-state sea border between their 12 nautical mile territorial waters, but did not set the boundary of their exclusive economic zones, or EEZs, while the 2009 agreement, of some significance for the current dispute between Somalia and Kenya, decided the boundary between the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zones in which states have exclusive economic rights. The boundary between Kenya and Tanzania, decided upon bilaterally, is as shown here, and runs along a perpendicular line in an easterly direction. The boundary set between Kenya and Tanzania has almost no precedent in international law, and as a bilateral agreement has limited relevance for the two states' case at the International Courts of Justice, and this has been the argument of the Somali delegation at the court on the issue. Were Kenya to lose the case outright, then its exclusive economic zone could be reduced significantly, and even somewhat restricted by its maritime boundaries to the north and south, as seen here. As stated prior, Somalia bases its claim on the principle of equidistance, as set out in Article 15 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and thus has the stronger case. The state took Kenya to the International Courts of Justice over the issue in 2014, accusing the state of awarding offshore oil and gas exploration blocks illegally to multinationals Total and Eni. With Kenya and Somalia being signatories of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, both countries have accepted the jurisdiction of the court, effectively making any judgment binding. However, despite this, the court has no real power of enforcement. Kenya has attempted to delay the case 4 times, and has been successful on 3 occasions, twice in 2019 and once in 2020 due to the growing global pandemic, resulting in an 18-month delay to proceedings. The geopolitical motivations behind Kenya's decision to try and delay proceedings are speculative and open to interpretation. However, the reason for the country dragging its feet was most likely to generate leverage. The state has said on multiple occasions that it does not believe the court should be the arbiter of the decision, and has expressed a desire to bring the case before the African Union, where it is an influential player, and would most likely get an outcome more favourable to its interests. By delaying and attempting to delay proceedings, Kenya was most likely hoping to force Somalia, which is in desperate need of cash from any natural resource extraction, into negotiating through the African Union, or to negotiate a bilateral agreement. However, the court has since denied Kenya a requested 4th delay, and proceedings began on the 15th of March. Prior to this, on the 11th of March, Kenya informed the court that it would not take part in proceedings, citing a perceived bias and unwillingness of the ICJ to accommodate requests for delaying the hearings as a result of the pandemic, effectively walking away from the court. So why did Kenya walk away from the world's top court in March of 2021? Simply put, it knows it does not have the stronger of the 2 cases, and that it will most likely lose out from any ruling. In short, Kenya knows that it has nothing to gain by taking part in the process. Again, Kenya's motives are open and speculative, but by pulling out of oral proceedings, the Kenyan government gains domestic political capital for when the court rules in favour of Somalia, and to some extent delegitimises the case, though any decision by the court will still be recognised internationally. Doing so plays well to a domestic political audience, and also allows the state flexibility in what it does next in regard to any ruling. So how will the case be resolved in Kenya's absence? Almost certainly, the court will rule along the principle of equidistance, as is precedent within the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. What this means is that the border that is created by the court will be a line of equal distance from the 2 countries' territories, originating at the coastal terminus of their land border, a relatively straightforward decision given the 2 states' lack of offshore territorial features that could influence any decision, and comparatively linear coastline. The principle of equidistance has been used to decide many of the world's sea border disputes. However, the court does also take other factors into account, and this will be the case between Kenya and Somalia. The court has already acknowledged many aspects of the 2 states' history and geography, and in particular, Somalia's aforementioned civil conflict that has left the state with a precarious security situation and in a tight spot economically. Saying this, the court will also most likely take into account the fact that a solely equidistant line will restrict Kenya's EEZ significantly, which will impact the delineation of its continental shelf further offshore, and the fact that its southern maritime border runs along an easterly latitudinal line. From our own analysis here at ARGS, we can say that the border will almost certainly look like something as shown here, and will take into account both the principle of equidistance, as per Article 15 of UNCLOS, and Kenya's earlier agreements with Tanzania, and any ruling will most likely be accepted by both parties. That said, an increasing theme of international relations and geopolitics in the 21st century has been the decreasing relevance of international law for many states, though this will most likely not be the case between Somalia and Kenya. Once the ICJ rules on the case, as mentioned before, most likely widely in favour of Somalia, then the country will be able to use its oil-generated wealth to begin a development process. In turn, were Somalia to develop in such a way, then the wider geopolitics of East Africa would be impacted massively. With a mass of oil-generated wealth behind it, Mogadishu could look to bring its unruly and separatist regions, such as the breakaway territory of Somaliland and the autonomous region of Puntland, back under firm control of the central government, thus changing the international connections these regions have developed, such as with the UAE and Kenya itself. Moreover, Somalia's advantageous geostrategic position overlooking the Gulf of Aden and its long coastline along the Indian Ocean could make the country an important transit point for goods going to and from developing states in East Africa, were it to develop its port network and infrastructure. For Kenya, a ruling in favour of Somalia would be a setback. The state could potentially lose 51,000 square kilometres of its claimed EEZ, something that, according to the RUSI, would impact its ambition to become a middle-income country as part of its Kenya Vision 2030. Moreover, a loss on the part of Kenya could worsen relations between the two countries further, especially if the state chooses to ignore the ICJ's ruling on the matter, which could be the case. If Kenya chooses to pursue closer ties to the breakaway region of Somaliland as a result of an ICJ ruling, this could spell problems for Somalia, which has a major issue with its territorial integrity. Kenya has already pursued closer relations with breakaway Somaliland following its fallout with Somalia, with the New York Times reporting that the state will open a consulate in Hargeisa, the capital of Somaliland, by the end of March 2021. Were tensions between Somalia and Kenya to continue on their current trajectory, the situation could become more precarious, though outright kinetic hostility is incredibly unlikely. However, with both states accepting the jurisdiction of the court on the issue, the resolution may also serve to provide a degree of clarity, and with the maritime border dispute resolved, relations between the two could also improve. Regardless of speculative geopolitical moves, the impact of the geopolitical shift that will occur as a result of the ending of the case is still yet to be seen. With a ruling in favour of Somalia more than likely impending, the country can look forward to reaping the benefits of any natural resource extraction in its coastal waters, and the state has reportedly already requested Turkey, a close ally and partner, begin exploring for oil as of 2020. For Somalia, the end of the dispute represents great opportunity, while for Kenya, it could represent a marginal loss. Nevertheless, the future of both states, providing their security situations improve, is a positive one, regardless of their current diplomatic quarrel.